My name is Abigail. And while I spend my days building vibrant, living digital worlds, in real life, sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in a dark corner of a screen, a background element no one really sees. I work as a game designer at Vortex Studios, one of the largest digital entertainment companies. At first glance, it seems like a creative paradise, colorful walls, game rooms with old arcade machines, and a constant flow of coffee. But behind the relaxed facade, there's an invisible hierarchy, an echo of old prejudices that seem to never die. I love my job. I love the process of taking an abstract idea and turning it into something people can touch, feel, and get lost in. My main focus has been creating artificial intelligence for our next big release, Phoenix Revolution. It's not just a game, it's a universe, an immersive experience where players' choices shape the reality of thousands of AI-controlled characters. I've spent the last 8 months immersed in this project. Every line of code, every algorithm tweak, was like sculpting a private universe. I feel a quiet pride in it, a kind of satisfaction only creators understand. But quiet pride doesn't pay the bills or get attention. At Vortex Studios, the spotlight isn't on the backstage, but on the stage. And on our particular stage, the star was Samuel. Samuel was the senior product manager, a charming man with a wide smile and an innate ability to make people laugh. He had an impressive resume, built largely on the backs of talented teams who, like me, preferred the work itself to the limelight. Samuel was the face of the project. He was the one who made presentations, who sold the vision to executives and investors. And he did it very well. So well that, sometimes, I almost forgot that the words and ideas he presented were, for the most part, mine. Abigail, you're a genius with code. The AI is a dream, he'd say, in that tone that seemed like a genuine compliment, but which sounded, in my ears, like, keep doing the heavy lifting while I reap the rewards. He had this ability to frame me as the technical expert, the code specialist, while he was the visionary. It was a polite way of keeping me in my place. I wasn't from a wealthy family, like many in Vortex's upper management. My journey was a bit more circuitous. I grew up in a neighborhood where having a computer was a luxury, not the norm. I taught myself to program, devouring books and online tutorials, participating in coding competitions at community centers. Getting into a renowned university was a battle, and every internship, every opportunity, was hard-earned. At Vortex, this humble origin was a detail no one mentioned, but one I felt lingering in the air, an invisible barrier separating me from those with influential last names and contacts. I wasn't looking for applause. My goal was to create something meaningful, something that would make a difference in the gaming world. But the constant minimization of my role started to weigh on me. Small comments, jokes in meetings about Abigail's monastic dedication, as if I were a robot programmed to work, with no life outside of code. I tried to ignore it, focused on the next line of code, the next challenge. But the truth is, it eroded my confidence, little by little. The pressure for the Phoenix Revolution launch was building. The date was set, and a major presentation to a select group of investors and the press was scheduled for the following week. Samuel was frantic, rehearsing his speech, polishing every slide. I was reviewing every millimeter of the AI, making the final adjustments, ensuring everything was perfect. The difference was, he rehearsed words, I rehearsed possibilities. That week, I felt a growing pang of anxiety. Not for the game, which I knew was impeccable, but for the presentation itself. I'd be there, sitting in the front row, watching Samuel shine with my brilliance. My throat would go dry just thinking about it. It was like a play whose script I knew by heart, but in which I had no voice. On the morning of the presentation, the air at Vortex Studios was charged with a different kind of electricity. It wasn't the creative energy of an ordinary day, but the nervous tension that precedes a big event. The company auditorium, usually used for internal meetings, had been transformed. Low lights, a gigantic screen displaying the Phoenix Revolution logo, and rows of upholstered chairs filled the space. A red carpet guided the guests, a small reminder that this was no ordinary day. I wore my best outfit, a well-cut blazer and flowing fabric pants, neutral, discreet colors. Nothing that would draw attention. I wanted to go unnoticed, to blend in, to be just another figure in the background. My mind was focused on every technical detail of the AI, in case any last-minute questions arose, although I knew Samuel would do his best to deflect any questions he couldn't answer. He was a master at that. I arrived early and sat in one of the front rows, as Samuel had instructed. "You need to be close, in case I need quick technical support, Abigail," he had said. Again, the role of support. I watched the guests arrive. Investors in impeccable suits, journalists with their notebooks and cameras, and some board members, legendary figures in the tech world. The murmur in the room grew, a hum of anticipation. Samuel entered the auditorium with a radiant smile. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine cover, impeccable suit, perfectly styled hair. He greeted people with firm handshakes and confident smiles, as if he were the host of a private party. He waved at me, a quick, almost imperceptible nod, before heading to the stage. The CEO of Vortex gave a brief introduction, extolling the potential of Phoenix Revolution and introducing Samuel as the visionary behind this revolution. I felt a knot in my stomach. Those words should have been mine. But they were said for him. Samuel took the stage. The lights focused on him. He took a deep breath, looked at the audience, and began to speak. His voice was smooth, confident, full of conviction. He spoke of the passion, the innovation, the freedom that Phoenix Revolution would bring to players. He described the game's universe with an eloquence that almost made me forget that I was the one who built it. He spoke of the AI's unprecedented intelligence, how it adapted, learned, reacted, and my thoughts raced to the countless hours I dedicated to achieving precisely that. "And all of this, of course," Samuel said, with a wide smile, gesturing to the screen displaying a complex graph of the AI's architecture, "was only possible thanks to a team of brilliant minds who understood and executed my vision." He paused briefly, sweeping the audience with his eyes. "We have here, for example, Abigail. An incredible technical mind, who dedicated herself to transforming these ideas into lines of code. It's a shame that not everyone has the same strategic vision to go beyond the basics, isn't it?" The entire room burst into laughter. Not a loud, boisterous laugh, but a murmur of suppressed chuckles, a silent nod of understanding. A journalist in the front row jotted something down in her notepad. An investor nodded in approval. My face burned. I felt the heat rise up my neck, reaching my ears, my cheeks. My hands, clasped in my lap, trembled slightly. I was, once again, the technical expert, the executor, someone who, despite all the work, lacked vision. My impulse was to get up and leave. To leave that room, that suffocating environment. But I stayed there, paralyzed, feeling every gaze in my direction. It was a familiar feeling, that of being observed, judged, and, in the end, diminished. I took a deep breath, trying to contain the wave of frustration and anger building in my chest. I didn't need to prove anything to them. But deep down, I wanted to. I wanted to scream the truth. Samuel continued, his voice still confident, unperturbed. He was in his element, basking in the applause for work that wasn't entirely his. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to compose myself. This was my reality. This was how things were at Vortex Studios. And I didn't have the power to change it. Or did I? Samuel continued his presentation, and I barely heard his words. My mind echoed the audience's laughter, the condescending tone, the feeling of being a shadow, a technical detail, never the essence. I could feel the gaze of my teammate, Clara, a junior programmer I was mentoring. She gave me a look of pity, which only worsened the feeling of humiliation. I didn't want pity. I wanted recognition. That's when it happened. An unexpected sound, a clear and distinct voice that cut through the air like a blade. "Excuse me." The voice was female, with a soft but undeniably firm accent. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. The auditorium, which until then had been immersed in Samuel's speech, fell silent. Samuel stopped speaking, his confident expression wavering for an instant, as if a bug had been detected in his system. All eyes turned to the source of the voice. It was Dr. Sarah Carter, a legendary angel investor in the gaming industry, known for her sharp eye for innovation and, more importantly, for her uncompromising integrity. She was sitting in the third row, and I hadn't even noticed her before. Sarah Carter wasn't one to talk much at events like this, she preferred to observe and analyze. Her presence there was already a testament to the importance of Phoenix Revolution. She didn't smile. She just leaned slightly forward, her eyes fixed on Samuel. "Samuel, your presentation is, no doubt, captivating. However, I have a question about the AI's architecture. You mentioned that it adapts and learns organically, which is quite a differentiator." Samuel, visibly uncomfortable but trying to maintain his composure, cleared his throat. "Yes, Dr. Carter. That was one of my main visions for the project. An AI that evolves with the player, that isn't static." Sarah Carter raised an eyebrow, a subtle gesture, but loaded with intent. "Interesting. But in my preliminary reports, and in conversations with your development team, I noticed that the methodology used to achieve this organic adaptability, especially concerning the self-learning algorithms, was quite particular. Abigail, could you explain in detail the genesis of this design approach? The initial prototypes I saw pointed to a different methodology, and I'd like to understand what led to this choice." Her question wasn't just a technical one. It was a spotlight, directed at me. The entire room turned to face me. I could feel cold sweat trickling down my neck. Samuel stood frozen on stage, his eyes fixed on me. His jaw was clenched. He wanted to intervene, but he didn't dare. Sarah Carter's authority was unquestionable. My heart pounded wildly, a drum in my ribcage. Part of me wanted to shrink, to whisper that Samuel could answer. But then, I looked at Sarah Carter. Her eyes held no pity. They held expectation. Respect. It was a chance. The chance I never thought I'd have. I swallowed hard, and felt a strange force, a different kind of warmth, rise through my chest. It was no longer anger, but a quiet determination. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly, but I held firm. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. I knew the AI of Phoenix Revolution like the back of my hand, because it was an extension of my mind. "Yes, Dr. Carter," I began, my voice a little shaky at first, but gaining firmness with each word. "The approach we developed for the adaptive AI was based on deep neural networks, but with a crucial difference: the introduction of emotion nodes that allow characters not only to react to events but also to interpret them contextually. This allows for a much more fluid narrative progression." I continued, detailing the challenges we faced, the solutions I implemented. I spoke about the learning models, the feedback loops that allowed the AI not only to learn from players but also to anticipate their movements, creating a truly dynamic experience. I wasn't just reciting facts, I was telling the story of my work, of the hours of trial and error, of the late nights spent debugging code and optimizing algorithms. Every word was imbued with my passion and my authorship. As I spoke, my eyes swept the room. Samuel was pale. The directors, who had previously laughed at his joke, now looked at me with a new expression, a mixture of surprise and, perhaps, recognition. I wasn't accusing them directly. I was simply presenting my truth, with the clarity and depth of someone who truly created. I didn't shrink. I spoke with the strength that came from knowing, with absolute certainty, that this was mine. The truth, finally, was on stage. Samuel, on stage, was visibly shaken. His forced smile had completely disappeared. He seemed to have shrunk, as if the air was being sucked out of him. His mouth was slightly open, and his eyes followed me with a mixture of shock and something that looked like fear. He tried to clear his throat, perhaps to interrupt, but Sarah Carter's steady gaze stopped him. She had leaned forward a little more, with an attentive expression, as if she didn't want to miss a single word of mine. The AI's adaptability, I continued, my voice now firmer and more confident than ever, is not just about reacting to commands. It was designed to anticipate. To learn not only the game pattern but also the player's emotional style. This creates an experience where the narrative is shaped not just by logical choices, but by the nuances of human feeling. For example, we implemented a continuous feedback system, where every player interaction feeds into an algorithm for NPC behavior readjustment, making each journey unique. I could see some board members nodding, a sign that they were understanding the depth of what I was saying. They didn't need to be code experts to grasp the complexity and originality of my approach. It was the difference between a superficial summary and true authorship. Finally, I finished my explanation, pausing and looking at Sarah Carter. She nodded slowly, a slight smile appearing on her lips. It wasn't a smile of satisfaction, but of recognition. "Fascinating, Abigail," she said, her voice a little softer now. "That's exactly what I hoped to hear. Thank you for that clarity." Then, she turned to Samuel. The change in her tone and posture was immediate. The amiability she showed to me turned into a cold seriousness directed at him. "Samuel," she said, her voice returning to its previous firmness, "you described the vision. But the execution, the true technical innovation that will make Phoenix Revolution a success, seems to have been underestimated in your presentation." Samuel cleared his throat again, trying to regain control. "Dr. Carter, as I said, the team was fundamental. Abigail is a vital part." Sarah Carter raised her hand, interrupting him. "With all due respect, Samuel, a vital part who, as I understand it, was the principal architect of the artificial intelligence. If I'm not mistaken, she dedicated sleepless nights to this module, didn't she? There's a difference between having a vision and building the reality of that vision. And Vortex Studios values those who build." The room fell into absolute silence. It was a different kind of silence than before. It wasn't the silence of humiliation, but that of realization. Samuel, who always knew how to use words to his advantage, had none now. His face was red, and he looked away. The CEO of Vortex, who until then seemed petrified, finally moved in his chair. He looked at me, then at Samuel, and the tension was palpable. I didn't say a word, just stood there, watching the scene unfold. It was the first time Samuel had been so exposed, so thrown off balance. And the feeling was liberating. Not out of revenge, but for justice. The silence seemed to stretch for an eternity. The CEO of Vortex, Mr. Taylor, cleared his throat, breaking the tension. He looked at Samuel, then at me, and finally at Dr. Carter, who maintained an unwavering expression. "Samuel," said Mr. Taylor, his voice graver than usual, "I think we need a moment to digest this. Why don't we take a short break before proceeding with the Q&A session?" It was an emergency exit, an attempt to save face, but the damage was already done. Samuel nodded rigidly, unable to find the words. He turned to the audience, a ghost of the confident man who had taken the stage minutes before. His eyes passed over me, but he didn't meet my gaze. It was as if I had become invisible again, but this time, because he couldn't bear to see me. People began to stand up, murmuring. Journalists exchanged glances, some already typing frantically on their phones. The investors, previously excited by Samuel's presentation, now seemed thoughtful, their faces contorted in expressions of doubt. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The energy in the air had transformed from euphoria to a buzz of uncertainty. I remained standing, observing the scene. My hands no longer trembled. There was a strange calm within me, a quietness I never imagined possible. It was the peace of knowing that the truth, finally, had been spoken. Not by me, directly, but through me, with the unexpected help of someone who cared enough to see. As the room slowly emptied for the break, Sarah Carter approached me. Her eyes, which had been piercing, now held a glimmer of approval. "Abigail," she said, her voice low, but laden with respect, "what you did today was remarkable. Not just for your technical clarity, but for your courage. It's rare to see someone stand so firm under such pressure." I just told the truth, Dr. Carter," I replied, my voice still a little choked with emotion, but strong. She smiled. "And the truth, my dear, is the most valuable currency there is, especially in this market. There are many Samuels out there, but few Abigails. She paused, looking at the door through which Samuel had left. "Always trust your work. And your worth. Never allow yourself to be diminished." Her words resonated within me like a hymn. For years, I had internalized the idea that my worth was conditioned on the approval of others, on the ability to fit in, to be the discreet technician. But at that moment, standing in the middle of an auditorium that had witnessed the collapse of an illusion, I realized that my value was intrinsic. It didn't depend on applause, but on my integrity and my effort. Clara, my junior colleague, ran up to me, her eyes wide. "Abigail. I can't believe what happened. That was incredible." I smiled at her, a genuine smile I hadn't shown at work in a long time. "Yes, Clara. Sometimes, the truth just needs a chance to be heard." Mr. Taylor, the CEO, reappeared at the auditorium door, his face tense. He beckoned me with a gesture. "Abigail, Dr. Carter would like to have a more in-depth conversation with you. Privately. In my office." He didn't call me to reprimand me. He called me to acknowledge me. At that moment, the tables had turned. Samuel had fallen from his pedestal, and I, the invisible technician, was being called to center stage. Not by artifice, but by the undeniable strength of my work and my voice. The CEO's office at Vortex Studios was grand. But, for the first time, I didn't feel intimidated by the luxury or the authority emanating from it. The presence of Dr. Sarah Carter by my side, and Mr. Taylor's serious gaze, made the environment less a courtroom and more a negotiation table. "Abigail," Mr. Taylor began, gesturing for me to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. He seemed to have aged 10 years in the last few minutes. "I need to be honest with you. What happened today was a shock. Although Samuel was an important link in the presentation, the depth of your work on the Phoenix Revolution project was not clear to the board, at least not with the clarity it had today." Sarah Carter interjected, her voice calm and assertive. "Mr. Taylor, with all due respect, was not clear is a mild way of saying that the authorship was obscured. The real issue here is integrity. Abigail's talent is undeniable, and the impact she can have on this company is immense. But that will only happen if she is properly recognized and supported." I felt a shiver. It was as if she was reading my thoughts, giving voice to all the frustration I had held for years. Mr. Taylor nodded, looking away. "Dr. Carter is right. Abigail, I must admit that we failed to give you due credit. And that is something we will correct." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Samuel will be reassigned to a different project, one that won't involve public presentations for a while. And, as for you, we want you to take over as head of the AI module for Phoenix Revolution. You'll have a larger team, more resources, and complete autonomy to take the AI to the next level. It's a directorial position. Do you accept?" My heart pounded. It was more than I could have dreamed of. It wasn't just recognition, it was a complete validation of my work, my vision. And it came at the moment I least expected it, and in the most unexpected way. I looked at Dr. Carter, who gave me an encouraging nod. Yes, I replied, my voice firm and clear, full of new conviction. I accept. Mr. Taylor smiled, a genuine smile this time. Excellent. We'll start the transition immediately. And, Abigail, we want you to be the new face of Vortex Studios in the field of artificial intelligence. You have the talent, the vision, and, as we saw today, the courage. I left that room with a feeling of lightness I hadn't felt in years. The weight I had carried on my shoulders had dissipated. The air outside seemed cleaner, the sky bluer. It wasn't just a promotion, it was the liberation from a shadow, the confirmation that I was not just a technical expert, but a leader, a visionary in my own right. The next day, the news spread like wildfire through Vortex Studios. The internal email announced my new position and Samuel's reassignment diplomatically, but the subliminal message was clear. People looked at me differently. Some, with surprise, others, with admiration. Some colleagues, who previously barely greeted me, now came to congratulate me, with a glimmer of hope in their eyes. It was as if my ascent opened doors for others who also felt invisible. Clara, my junior colleague, was the first to hug me. I knew it, Abigail. I always knew you were brilliant. Her enthusiasm was contagious. I received a message from Dr. Carter later that day. A single sentence, you more than deserved it. Those words meant the world to me. She hadn't rescued me, she had given me the platform to rescue myself. She just gave me a chance, and I grabbed it with both hands. The journey of building the AI for Phoenix Revolution had been challenging, but the journey of finding myself, of giving voice to my truth, was even more transformative. Taking on the directorship of the Phoenix Revolution AI module was like entering a different dimension. The meetings were more intense, the decisions more complex, and the responsibility, immense. But, for the first time, I wasn't just executing, I was leading, creating, and, most importantly, being heard. My voice now carried weight. My ideas were debated, not dismissed. Samuel, as Mr. Taylor had said, was reassigned. I no longer saw him in important meetings, and the hallways seemed lighter without the presence of his superficial charisma. The aura he carried had dissolved, and the jokes that were once directed at me now hung over him. I felt no satisfaction in his fall, only a confirmation that integrity, in the end, always finds its way. The following days were a mix of euphoria and intense learning. I dove into the new challenges with renewed energy. I had more resources, a larger team to guide, and the freedom to truly innovate. It was as if, suddenly, all the doors that had been closed opened at once. But the biggest change wasn't in my career, it was in me. The public humiliation, though painful, had been the catalyst. Sarah Carter's intervention not only gave me a platform but showed me that I wasn't alone. She gave me proof that there were people who valued hard work and honesty, not just image. I used to believe I needed to fit in, to be smaller so as not to bother anyone. Naomi's story resonated with me, the feeling of being used goods, just for not following a predetermined script. For years, I let others' expectations and judgments define my worth. Samuel's joke about lacking strategic vision was just another one of those internalized voices. But by standing up in that auditorium, by defending my work with the truth, I realized that my strength wasn't in silencing myself, but in speaking up. Not in shrinking, but in occupying my space. I had built a life with grit, with intelligence, with a heart that kept beating even when it seemed no one cared about my brilliance. If someone tries to diminish my worth again, I won't stay silent. I won't scream. I won't cry. I'll do exactly what I did that day. I will stand up, look them in the eye, and with the silent strength of my truth, I will show them what I have achieved. Not because I'm perfect, but because I refuse to give up on my own worth. Because healing begins the moment you stop apologizing for your truth. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of your own strength, your worth, or a time when you stood up for yourself, I hope you carry that with you. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to start over. And if no one told you today, you're doing better than you think. Thank you for listening to Abigail's story. Tell me in the comments if you identified with it. If you liked this story, like and share this video and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.